Hey everybody, we have an early version, at least out here on the West Coast, for our AI coaching series. I'm going to introduce our next guest in the series is Ryan Dickerson. He's a seasoned executive career coach, interview coach, former headhunter. He's a founder of Good Fit Careers. You can see their little logo down here. Where he helps individuals find fulfilling, meaningful careers. Ryan is well-versed in topics like jobs, career coaching, and executive search. He's taken his career coaching services to the next level by incorporating AI technology to enhance his clients' job search experience. So, everybody, I'd like to welcome Ryan Dickerson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jared.
Excellent. Thank you. And your logo's all, I didn't notice it's covered up by your sweater there, but all right. It's all right. We got ourselves other stuff as well.
Yeah, no worries.
So how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Jared. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Freeze up. Okay. So I want to get started with for anyone who a lot of my people in my community are speech and debate coaches. So career coaching might be something that is a little tangential to it. Can you tell us a little bit about like your background, what exactly career coaching is?
Yeah, sure. So after college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I ended up getting a recruiting job sometime around the 2012 timeframe and found that I enjoyed it and was good at it. And so after a couple years working with an Oracle systems integrator, I got picked up by Korn Ferry. I got to work in the global chief information officers practice where we hired CIOs and CTOs and other tech executives for some pretty premier companies. Then moved to an in-house role where I got to build out the infamous applicant tracking systems that people are all so nervous about. Took that company public, and then I ran a staffing firm for a little while out in Austin, Texas. And for the last 4 years, I switched sides. I found that I cared a lot more about these great candidates who were just not necessarily delivering their best interviews or finding their way successfully. So I built a practice around just that. And today what I do is I help executives and vice presidents who are preparing to transition to a new company after ideally several years with the same firm. And I help them try to figure out how to tell, of their 20 or 30 years of career history, what do you bring up? What story do you tell? What narrative do you weave? How do you build positioning that's realistic and tangible for other people to consume and build their own, opinions based on your background? And I focus on three big things. I help them figure out how to tell that story, how to find opportunities that are going to be realistic. And then I help them, prepare for their interviews by doing research and mock interviews with them.
Excellent. So like before all the technology got involved, what were some of the, I guess, low tech things that you would do? What was the process that you would follow?
Yeah. The way that I would approach this in the before times is it was a lot of note taking, a lot of phone calls. There weren't such advanced tools that we have today. And so I had to get very good at both leading a conversation, documenting and taking notes on that conversation, synthesizing my guidance and recommendations, and then also preparing for whatever the next question needed to be. So it was just a bunch of spinning hats, that you had to, or spinning plates you had to deal with at all different times. It was challenging because keeping everything organized, being accurate about what you're documenting, and then creating a good work product all were very tricky.
So what have you done? So how has AI changed, I guess, your workflow is the way I like saying it.
Yeah. So with AI being such an emergent space and everything changing so quickly, I feel like the way that I use it changes almost every day. At first, I started using a tool called Udily, and that helped me with interview preparation and practice. Once they built out the Zoom integration and allowed me to have conversations that would be recorded and transcribed, but then also with some good analytics on speech performance, that allowed me to kind of weave it into every session that I do with clients now. And one of the big things that I found is very helpful is in the intake process, when I'm beginning to learn about a person's history and where they've been and how they became the professional they are today. Sometimes I'll repeat back what I heard, what I heard them say, and I'll say it in slightly different words. One of the things that I wasn't able to do in the past was be able to have a clip of that, a recording or a transcript of, that brief moment of brilliance, right? That they're like, oh, that was perfect. That's what I want. That's what I want this description to sound like. Can you send me, the transcript? And it's like, geez, a couple of years ago, not so much. And now I can send them the clip, the transcript, and I can also help them kind of build bullet points around the same thing. So to land the plane a little bit here, I use the AI tools for a whole range of different things, from resume writing through interview coaching.
I have found similar sort of feedback in my teaching approach as well. I'm wondering, what is it about AI analytics that get people to just kind of go, "Oh, I trust that," but it wasn't like if I would give them feedback, I'm like, "No, you have a lot of verbal fillers." And they're like, "Okay, well, not that big a deal." He's like,
Or
"I
so do
don't know."
you, right?
Yeah, yeah, everyone does. So, but being able to show it to them, what do you think it is that really makes that sort of like cross that threshold?
I think this is kind of a core human behavioral component. We like to make up our own minds. We like to draw our own conclusions. And just
Mm,
like when I coach candidates on how to go about the interview process, right? Our job as the candidate is to present evidence and to allow the decider on the other side of the table to make up their own mind. And so when we can use tools like Udemy or other AI tools that provide robust analytics on your speech behavior and patterns, they can see it and they already know what good looks like and sounds like because they've heard professionals deliver all sorts of content, be it actors or podcasts or what have you. They know when somebody's delivering, a good segment of speech. And so I think that having the evidence right there in front of you, being able to say, oh, you know what? I see the recording. I can count how many times I said, it was 173 times in six
yeah.
minutes. You may have told me that, but seeing it there is a stark reminder that, wow, yeah, I can't really hide, from this data point. And it allows me to be a much more gentle coach because I can go in and say, look, maybe we want to bring this down from 5% filler words to 3, right? Send some realistic goals. And I think that having something where it's like, look, here's the evidence. We can't really, change your sprint time on the track, right? Having the evidence there allows them to say, oh, you know what, you're right. I probably did say 172 times, right? And I'm
Yeah.
willing to kind of work
Yeah.
towards something a little bit less.
Yeah, so I just wanted to let everyone know what we're talking about. Udemy AI is also something that I've been using in my classes. I teach speech and debate courses, and I'm going to be working it into my group dynamics course. We're going to find ways to have it into our interpersonal course as well. Have you had a chance to like they're generating more and more tools within their platform as we speak? Have you had a chance to use their conciseness feedback yet?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Their GPT-3 integration is pretty slick. So for
Yeah.
everybody out there who might not know what this is, what you can do is you hop on this platform and it will record what you're saying, be it a minute long, be it an hour long, whatever you'd like. And what it'll do is it'll transcribe all the text that you spoke about, and it'll summarize it and say, here's what we heard. And it'll give you a couple bullet points summarizing your minute long speech. And then it'll also take a segment of that speech and it'll redline it. And it'll say,
Yeah.
these words may not have been necessary. You might want to consider swapping this or that. And I find it to be pretty magical. It doesn't work super well on like an hour long kind of conversation.
Mm,
But
right.
if you're trying to practice, a simple response to tell me your story or tell me about yourself, and you've got 2 or 3 minutes worth of text, it's pretty glorious. The other thing that's coming that's pretty exciting is the predictive questions. So it'll
Mm.
start to begin to ask you follow-up questions based on the content of your previous answers, which I think is going to start to make these AI tools a little less clunky and a little bit more kind of conversational and, maybe a little bit less lonely on the other side.
One of the other analytics is about like non-inclusive language.
Yeah.
As a teacher, that is just fascinating to me that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
got something that could point that out. It, have you found has the job market changed when it comes to, I don't know, interviews and language choices? And has it changed the way you've coached and how people enter into these interviews?
Over the last several years, absolutely. I think back to my early days, right in the 2010s, in recruiting and executive search, and just then were we starting to get laws in place where you couldn't ask about previous compensation, or anti-discrimination laws were coming into effect. And so over that decade, things have evolved substantially. And I think the way that I coach people today on being inclusive, not necessarily using offensive language, or even something as simple as translating instead of looking under the kimono, we just want to say looking under the hood, or something that
Yeah.
would be a little less pointed. And so I tend to find that there's a certain amount of neutrality that you have to strike up in any of these conversations. And I tend to tie that back to our job as the candidate. When we're in an interview, we're not really supposed to be espousing our opinions or our beliefs. We're not necessarily going to talk politics or whatever it may be. We're just presenting evidence. We're helping people build their frame of reference for, our background and what we can bring to the table so that they can draw their own conclusions about what we might be able to do with them. And so I think in general, I try to have people steer away from anything that would, be untoward or perhaps perceived, in a way that they didn't intend.
Yeah. Udemy has been a game changer in my classroom, but also some of the generative AI stuff that is coming out is like, I have a whole new level of prep work that I have to do for this upcoming semester because it has upended the way that I do assignments.
Yeah.
Have any of the other AI sort of tools, are you using them in your approach?
Sure. I would say that I've experimented with a bunch of them and used them interchangeably. I find that Hugging Face has a brilliant integration now with Wolfram Alpha that lets
Mm,
you do both math and physics while having a large language model that you can put your prompts into. I think Chat GPT and GPT-3 DaVinci are both amazing. I use GPT-3, specifically OpenAI's Playground with the DaVinci 3 model, to build keyword banks. So something that I find is helpful is, let's say you're going to go be a chief marketing officer somewhere. That's your intended target. You can essentially establish a set of formats within the Playground to say, hey, I want 50 specific keywords that I can use for search engine optimization for a chief marketing officer, and
mm.
it'll give you a great starting point in just a millisecond. And so I think the way that I use it is to be a little bit of a sounding board, right? Summarize this or that to make sure that my points are getting across. But also from a generative standpoint, things that I might not have considered. I think the SEO side is pretty spectacular because I'm not an SEO expert, but I can be 70% as good of an SEO expert with the help of some of these tools. And that can help with LinkedIn rankings and how they show up within executive search resume databases and whatnot. So I think I've thrown a bunch of different stuff at it. But given that we're really, less than a year or so into this, next wave of generative AI, I'm thinking that, the just things like cover letter writers and things that'll
Yeah.
help you write summary
Oh, man.
sections for your resume, or, I mean, there's just infinite creativity that's happening right now, and I'm so excited to see where else it goes in the next 6 months.
Well, the whole resume, probably. You just say, "Hey, like like, here's my LinkedIn, rewrite my resume for me."
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I
even
think it.
for your intro, I was able to just get your LinkedIn information. I'm like, "Hey, generate a nice little introduction right here." I'm like,
Yeah.
"That is as good as anything I would have written myself."
Totally. I think the
Absolutely.
piece that isn't a threat in my mind is I can't just take a bunch of nonsense and make a great resume. And so I
Mhm.
think what I tend to focus on now, just like any data scientist would tell you, garbage in equals
Right,
garbage out. And
right.
so what I'm excited about now is that I get to focus more time on the human, right? The person, and understanding their story, how they built whatever they did or how they achieved whatever they achieved. And then I get to spend less time on formatting and making sure that I've got spacing right and, these, little details here and there. But I think that it's going to be a more of a mutually beneficial kind of symbiosis than it's going to be replace all resume writers. There still has to be, some interview component to it, in my opinion, to build a good story.
Right. You brought up Hugging Face. I looked into that a
Yeah.
little bit, and it seemed a bit daunting to me
Okay.
at first.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
how have you been able to approach it? Do you have coding experience, or do you think you need it in order to do that?
No, no, I have the furthest thing from coding experience. I've hired a bunch of people who do data science and
Ah,
software development, but that's you only need enough to be able to have a conversation. You don't need to be able to ship product, with that level of understanding.
okay.
What I've done is I've just simply read about it and listened to, either YouTube videos or podcasts about people doing the same thing, watched how they've done the same things, and then just experimented and just throw stuff at the wall and see what works and what doesn't. I think the chat version of the interface. So if you go to Hugging Face now, they've got a whole series of their most popular different models on the right-hand side of the
Uh-huh.
page. If you just go to those top ones, there are going to be a whole bunch of different guides on how to use it. There's going to be great video content out there to see how other people have applied the same concepts. My encouragement is, while it may seem daunting, it's just like trying out a new app, right? You got to poke around, see what works, see if you can break it, see if you can make it do anything you want it to do. But my encouragement for folks is, if it feels daunting, start with something simple like if you can get onto Chat GPT while it's not busy, so anytime outside of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, it's normally
Yeah.
pretty available, and just start there and just see what it can do. The way that I introduce this to people and the way that I encourage my clients and friends and family to use this is start by asking a question about something that's difficult or that has been difficult for you in the past. And I think about when I shared Chat GPT with my dad for the first time. Back in the day, he was big into IT, and back when punch cards were the core language of
Right.
computing. And he got into C and all that, but it was one of those where compiling something that would actually work, like the game of Pong, would be super difficult for an individual just to hammer out. And I typed into the Chat GPT, write a simple version of the game Pong in C. And I
Mm,
hit enter, and he just got to watch it compile all the libraries, all the different scripts, everything, seemed from a layman's point of view accurate. I have no idea if it ran. I did not test it, but
right.
watching that come together was a bit of an aha moment that made it a little bit more applicable. And so now my mom uses ChatGPT to figure out what she wants to make for dinner, right? She lists out, I have these things in the fridge. I'm feeling this kind of direction. Give me 5 options. And then from there, she'll pick a recipe and it'll make a list for her, And so I think my biggest encouragement is give it a try. It may be kind of foreign and a little bit alien for now, but these user interfaces are advancing very quickly. And I think it'll improve to the point where everybody can use this just like we use Google today.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I put in some. I've been playing with it, and
Yeah.
so some of the things that I've been doing is like, all right, find figures of speech in popular culture,
Yeah.
and give me examples and things like that. I want to see what it can do, and some of them are great. I'm like, oh my goodness, it does really great ones. But
Yeah.
I've been told that it also hallucinates sometimes. And so
Totally.
I thought that was a really interesting term, the hallucination. So
Yep.
one result that it gave me back for like, find me an example, it just made up an example. It like at like, all right, in the West Wing, this episode, here's what was some dialogue. The
Right.
dialogue never existed
Yep.
in that episode. It just kind
Yeah.
of made it up.
Yep.
Do you have any concerns about, does that affect your approach? Does like when AI hallucinates one way or another, has
Yeah.
that affect your approach to your job and things like that?
It certainly gives me reason to pause and read
Okay.
thoroughly everything that's an output. I think as somebody who would have, has historically written every word of all this from scratch, it's very easy to read the rough draft and say, "Oh no, that's not right. No chance." The thing that I'm finding exciting is just yesterday, GPT or OpenAI released a patch to
Mm.
Chat GPT that improves both its math capability and factuality. And so I think that there's
Oh,
going to be rapid improvements in its ability to have kind of a series of different transformers. So GPT is a form of transformer that allows us to take rough language and build it into something that's going to be machine readable. And having a whole series of those different things, something for spell check, perhaps something for factuality and historical relevance. I
right.
think there's going to be a consensus kind of engine eventually that'll allow us to be much more accurate there. My core point on this though is that if you're an expert in your field, if you really know your stuff, then using something like a transformer will allow you to extend your reach. The rub is if you don't know what you're doing,
Mm.
it
Right.
can misremember, just like
Right.
we all with our imperfect memories. And so you
Right.
have to be very careful about what you might publish or produce because it could be total nonsense. So I think just like a calculator might be able to give you a variable that you might not understand, same thing here. Check your work, make sure that it's all validated before you go out to market. But if you are an expert and you know the right answer, it can be very helpful in improving your efficiency and taking unstructured things and making them structured, or transforming things in a way that would be arduous for us to do with a simple interface.
Have you come across ethical concerns, like even like either that have come up or that you are seeing on the horizon might come up,
Oh, yeah.
specifically within your field?
So within the interview coaching, career coaching space, I think the hard part here is going to be just like you talked about before, the imprecise language or something that's just wholly inaccurate. I think that the bigger concerns that I have are, people using this for, more untoward intentions. I
Mm.
think having people out in in the world be able to write a cover letter in an instant, just like I would imagine in an academic setting, writing a paper now is a much more complicated ordeal. I
Yeah.
think that having those things in some ways might be a nice thing, right? If everybody can write a beautiful cover letter, then why do we need cover letters anymore? you know,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that with some of the things that become very easy to do on these machines, it might make us question how important it is for our, high paid professionals to spend time reading a cover letter that was obviously machine written, and that
Mhm.
everybody writes a cover letter that's machine written. So then it makes me think about, how is this kind of technology, just like the abacus or the calculator, going to change our kind of day-to-day operating process, and how are assessments going to look, how is testing going to look, and I think that cheating on assessments and being unfair about your approach to, writing a paper or doing a sample of work, I think those things can be problematic. But I think the benefits of having, the TI-83 calculator as opposed to, just a simple, addition subtraction kind of machine, just like we're going from now with a word processor to a large language model, I think will enable far more than it could be problematic. But I don't know. I mean, I think this should be very clear and well-defined global rules for, AI ethics. But gosh, I'm the furthest from the
Yeah.
position of authority there.
Um, so there was almost immediately after GPT like made its big splash, there is a student that came up with GPT zero, which is a
Yeah.
way of detecting whether or not something. So in the academic sense, turning in essays, and people are talking about how the death of the academic essay is just upon us right now.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, along the lines of what you were just talking about how, maybe the cover letter isn't all that necessary. Like maybe the writing sometimes gets in the way of the critical thinking,
Yeah.
right? The work of actually putting letter to letter to letter,
Yeah.
end to end, is actually not doing the service that you think it is. That's like the
Mhm.
grunt work. And so if you're able to generate large chunks of ideas at the time with just certain prompts, now you can really evaluate. You can step back. You have time to look at it. Because
Yeah.
whenever I get at the end of my first draft, it's just so exhausting. It's just like, oh, just keep writing till you get to the end of the page. Just keep writing. Just keep
Right.
writing.
You can do it.
Like, don't think. Just you'll have time to edit later. And
Yeah.
now that whole process seems to be upended. I mean,
Yeah.
is that your experience?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think I tend to be more optimistic and hopeful. And my thinking on this is that we will find a way to adapt to make what is relevant and most important with whatever we're teaching or learning or trying to produce, and start thinking about the division of labor. And so, what of this is going to be something that I can train a simple model to do? What of this requires real
Yeah.
thought? And I can apply this to what I do every day. So when I work with executives who are trying to tell their story, it takes a good bit of relationship building to get to the point where people can help you understand where they come from and how they came to be professionally. And I don't think that we're at a point yet where, an AI platform could facilitate that interview and be able to dig in on what's going to be relevant, to encourage or to elicit a greater response here or there. And so I think that we're going to see divisions of labor, and I think we're going to see, areas where it makes more or less sense for, like if you had to, thinking about mathematics, if you had to calculate the cube root of a number, that's a lot to do on paper. But if you can just
Mhm.
punch it into the computer, you can advance to the next part of the proof or whatever you're working on. And I think about this in the same way. We're now at the point where we've got the calculator for language. How can we then extend our reach and, think about advanced mathematics or physics beyond just the computational side that's required to slam out something that would make general sense to most people. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Language has become a recent sort of fixation of mine.
Yeah.
I don't know, which is strange because I got a degree in rhetoric, but up until that point, it's it was more on the persuasion end of it, but
Yeah.
the actual sort of rules governing language and what it is at its core and how it makes us human and like makes us unique as a species is something
Yeah.
that's really been fascinating to me over the last 5 years. And so now these large language models come out and it really blows my mind
Yeah.
about how we use language, how of a massive advancement in just society language itself was, and how this is on par with that. We've
Oh
really
yeah.
reached an inflection moment when it comes to language right now.
Oh
It's
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so for the last like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've just gone down this rabbit hole with
Good. What fun.
ChatGPT. I mean, you should see how many chats I have just on that list there. Just so many things, and it's like having a conversation with somebody.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And I mean, to take it a little bit further, one of the things that I'm very excited about is the universality of this.
Mhm.
Whisper and a whole series of the other large language models can translate nearly every language and nearly every dialect in near real time. And I think in weeks or months or years that'll improve dramatically. But the concept of being able to have a conversation like this, have the model of the tonality and tenor of our voices be consistent, but then spoken in Urdu or whatever other language we
Right.
might not necessarily natively be able to speak. I think it opens up a whole world of educational opportunities, of communication opportunities for people all over the planet. And I mean, that to me is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's get back to the job coaching.
Yeah,
So, do you have success stories, like maintaining privacy of your clients? But
of
have any
course.
of your clients used it, and it's been a memorable sort of success story?
I have a couple favorites. So I was working with a senior executive at a large insurance company, and he runs the project management office for that business. And so he deals with enormous technology transformation projects and a whole series of other large, complicated, expensive ordeals that for a large business like that is difficult. He got to the point where he was ready to make a change, and I introduced the tool Udily to him specifically. And we built out his resume. We got everything going for him. We did our interview coaching practice, and he was prepared. He was good to go. But something that he used Udily for that I thought was a great application and something that he really kind of overextend or not overextend. He used a lot of this tool before his interviews. He would make sure that he practiced his kind of three core questions that we struggled with
Mm,
when we were working together. One was a very quick and simple intro, so who are you? What are you all about? And when we were originally working on this, he did a good job, right? I mean, he told a good, clear story, but I think he just didn't feel the same level of confidence when he couldn't see how he had delivered that. And so, he's a big sports guy and was a big fan of being able to review the tape. And so before he would go into these big executive interviews, he would practice these three, 1 minute long responses. He would watch himself say them. And then it gave him both, the feedback, but it also gave him the confidence. He said, okay, I saw exactly how I delivered that. He understood, what was said. He could see himself in the replay. And then he could also start to think about, ooh, with this practice story that I tell often, how do I remove this or improve that? And so I think the biggest thing that I've seen people use this for is practice so that they can go in and deliver a very succinct and clear description of whatever it is they're trying to do. The other one that I found is very interesting is one of my more tech-focused executives. He started customizing his keyword banks. So what he would do is he would take
mm,
DaVinci, OpenAI's GPT-3, and he would train it. He would essentially say, all right, here are the rules for the keyword bank. And he would build out, based on the individual position description, a keyword bank for that role before he applied. So every single time he applied to a new role, the story didn't change. The resume wasn't different, but the keyword bank that we had at the very end of the document that was easy
mm.
to read from machines, he would extract the content directly from the position description he was applying to improve his chances. And I think there's a slippery slope there. Once everybody starts realizing that, the sorting components of applicant tracking systems are going to become, perhaps a little confused or oversaturated. But I think between building keyword banks and then practicing those kind of key cornerstone stories have been my two favorite instances.
Excellent. So you have a blog on your website as well. I want to make sure. There we go. There we
Thank
go.
you.
All
Yeah.
right. So one of the more recent ones that you had was you were talking about. There's been a lot of layoffs, especially at tech companies right now. And so, do you think that there's any way that AI is going to factor into these layoffs, especially in ways that might be different to previous waves of layoffs?
Oh, sure. I think there's going to be a whole series of things that we're not going to be able to predict. And I think we're
Mm,
going to see disruptions and changes across the board. One of the things that I do see consistently happening right now is people focusing a lot more when they're doing the hiring on the capabilities, the strategic side of things, the softer skills. And I think broadly, we're going to see a lot of the very simple to automate tasks, or even what historically was more complicated to automate tasks. I think those are going to become increasingly machine led. And so
mm,
what I imagine to happen, just like we talked about in education and whatnot, less focus on the computation of a cube root and more focus on the theory of the mathematics behind it. And so I think broadly, we're going to see more focus on, instead of a sample of work product that would be like an essay equivalent, I think we would have more of a live kind of example here where you'd have to see someone think through it, a more engaging and collaborative kind of style of assessment. So I don't think that all those changes have been baked in yet. And I don't
Mhm.
think that large language models and other large transformers have been integrated into applicant tracking systems at scale yet. But I do think that over time, we're going to have much more efficient and effective assessment tools, just like Udemy, to allow people to go through an automated interview process and have the hiring party with a relatively high confidence understand who they're working with and the potential of that candidate. But I think we're so early that we haven't had a real winner in the space yet. And once we do have an emergent technology that becomes ubiquitous in hiring or resume writing or whatever it is, I think those changes will be long lasting.
Because I've been doing a lot more work that's associated with coaching and career advice and things like that, I think I've been getting recommended videos on, mock interviews that people
Yeah.
actually publish online. And the ones that fascinate me are the developer interviews, and they actually have a coding problem that
Yeah.
they present to their interviewees, right? The
Yeah.
people that are there sitting down are presented with this problem. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world is that going to change? It's like, yeah, can I just open up Chat GPT and do that? Can I show you what my prompt is that I would put in for this
Yeah.
particular question and how I would fact check it and things like that? It's
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's a game changer, you know what I mean? For
Oh,
something
yeah.
like that.
Oh yeah. So for instance, HackerRank, years ago was a platform that I used when I was an in-house talent acquisition leader. And one of the things that we found was amazing about it is it gave us such rich insights into someone's coding ability. I think that with things like GitHub's
Yeah.
Copilot AI, as well as some of the other coding capabilities out there now, I think we're going to see just more broad prompts. And instead of, help us write the game Pong in C, it'll
Right.
be, think about how do we build the architecture for a large distributed game? And then
Mm,
you start to think about how do I begin to plug in those components? And so historically, there was a delineation between the software engineer and the systems architect. And I think we're going to start to see more of that merged, where a large language model or the equivalent can serve as the back end and can also provide a little bit of guidance around what components are going to be necessary to build whatever product you're working on. So my hope is that those coding interviews, instead of calculating the cube root, right, it's tell me your strategy, tell me your
right.
approach, help me think about what the goals are going to be. And so the business analyst, the technical architect, the software developer, the data scientist, I think all those are going to come together, and we're going to have, much more productive individuals who are much more broadly capable, but kind of only through the use of the calculator or the larger language model in these systems. So I hope that it brings us to the next level of our ability to, create more, be more productive, be more efficient, and make, perhaps more abundance and less suffering around the world.
All right. Last, do you just parting words? Do you have any last advice for any job seekers out there that might be thinking about using AI tools for their job search?
Give it a try. I
Mm,
think the biggest advice that I can give people is, or the most valuable advice is, I encourage you to try things out, see what works, see what doesn't, see what you can make something of. I think the curiosity and the exploration of some of these things can give you a great platform to talk about it in an interview, right? If you're a software engineer and you're coming into the interview talking about all the new things that you've learned how to do with this bleeding edge technology, I think that'd be a fascinating way to have a conversation, because I imagine the people on the other side of the table are just as excited about it as you are. So explore your creativity, figure out what's exciting and what works for you. I think using tools like Udemy is very helpful when you want to practice your interviews and prepare. And I also think that, the place of the career coach and folks like me is still there. So if you are a director, if you're a vice president, if you're someone who's been with the same company for quite some time and you're considering making a change, give me a call. Let me know if I can do anything to help. There are a bunch of us out there that can help you figure out how to tell your story, how to build a go-to-market strategy, and how to, really prepare for your interview so you can land the job you're excited about.
all right. Thank you so much. Ryan Dickerson from Good Fit Careers. Check him out. All right. I'm going to play us out right now. Thank you so much. We'll have another interview about AI and coaching in the near future, everybody. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Jared.